So now that we've done a lot of different types of comparisons or kind of logical operations using numeric data types, I want to take a moment to also start talking a little bit about comparing string objects. So when you're comparing the objects of the string class, there's going to be a slight issue with using this equals equals operator, the equality operator. As mentioned previously, variables for strings are going to be reference variables. So what this means is that rather than holding the string object itself, so maybe like some phrase with a sequence of characters, instead the variables are going to hold a reference to the string object, meaning that they're going to hold some kind of address or some kind of location that specifies where we would go to find that string object. So if we use the equality operator, you're going to be comparing the references rather than the contents themselves. You're basically asking, okay, I have one string object that's in one location, somewhere in the memory of my program, and then I have another string object that's in some other location. I'm going to compare those locations. Basically asking, are these two things in the same location? Or put another way, are they the same object? But generally speaking, we're not really concerned with whether or not two strings are the same object. What we really want to know is, do these two strings hold the same contents? Do they have the same sequence of characters in them? So instead, what we need to use is the equals method, which is part of the string class. So we can see right here with this example, we've got two strings, name1 and name2. Name1 is going to have the string literal Mark assigned to it, and then name2 is going to have Mary assigned to it. And then we can see our two different conditions right here. So the first one's going to be comparing the references held by name1 and name2. So we see if name1 is equivalent to name2 using the equality operator, then we'll go ahead and execute some code. So we've got our pair of curly braces and then just some sort of initial setup saying we're going to put some code there later. Alternatively, we can go ahead and compare the actual contents of the strings referenced by name1 and name2 using the equals method. And the syntax for this is going to be that we will pick one of our two variables, either name1 or name2, and we're going to call the equals method on that object. So we're going to say something like name1.equals, and then we put in or pass in the other thing that we're going to be comparing it to. So essentially we're saying, is name1 equal to name2? And if that's true, then we'll go ahead and do something. So to better demonstrate the problem with the distinction between these two operations, we're going to consider the following example. So in this one, we're going to go ahead and create two strings, name1 and name2. One of these is going to be Mark with more typical capitalization. The other is going to be name2. It's going to be Mark in all capitalization. So then we're going to go ahead and do name1.to uppercase. So we're going to take the first string and switch that so that all of the letters are capitalized, and then we're going to check to see if that's equivalent to name2. And if this worked the way that we had possibly intended for it to, where we were comparing the contents, we would expect it to say that the strings are equal. So let's test this and see what happens. So we're going to go ahead and minimize this. I'm going to come over to NetBeans, and for this one we'll go ahead and create a new Java application that we're going to call comparing string objects. Actually, keep this a little bit shorter. Let's go with comparing strings. Go ahead and finish this. Go ahead and remove our extra comments. And so right here inside of the main method, we'll go ahead and put in those two strings. So we're going to have string name1. This is going to be equal to Mark. So we're going to be using the string literal. We have those double quotes around it. It's going to be Mark with a capital M. The rest is lowercase. We'll then do string name2. This one's going to be equal to Mark in all capital letters. We're then going to do if name1.to uppercase is equal to name2. Then we're going to have a little statement that we want to print out here where we're going to say the names are equal. There's a system.out.println. we'll say the names are equal. So if we go ahead and save this, and if we run this, we're going to see that nothing is printed to the console, and the reason for that is because of the fact that even though we're changing name1 to be in all capital letters, it is still technically a completely separate, independent string object, so completely different from mark, meaning that these are going to be located in at two different addresses in memory. So these, when we compare them using the equality operator, they're not going to be equal to each other. So instead, what we want to use is the equals method. So we can actually do that using this right here, and then kind of just adding on the equals method. So let's take a look at the syntax for something like that. So we're going to do our name1 dot to uppercase. So when we do this much, this is going to give us a string with name1 in all capital letters, and because it's going to give us that string, we can go ahead and actually add on more methods using this as if it were just name1 in all capital letters. So we're going to go ahead and just tack on another method right here, and inside of this one we're going to put in name2. So we're going to be comparing name2 to the capitalized version of name1. And then right here we're going to go ahead and try to print that statement out again. So do system.out.println. We'll say the names are equal. And save that. And now if we go ahead and run this, this one will be true, so we will get this instance of that statement. So we run it, and we can see one instance of that sentence being printed to the console. So that's going to be for this one right here. So in addition to the equals method, there's going to be 3 other methods that we can work with. So altogether we have 4 typical methods for comparing the contents of 2 strings. The equals method is going to check if the 2 objects have the same contents. So it's going to give us either a true or false value. Because of that, that's the reason we can use it in our if statements. It evaluates to either true or false. We can use equals ignore case when we're not concerned with the case of the letters. So this will achieve the same behavior, but we don't have to capitalize everything. So let's say that we come back over to our program real quick. We'll go ahead and modify this a little bit. So instead of doing name1 dot to uppercase, I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of all of this. And instead I'm going to change this method to be equals ignore case. Go ahead and save that. And so now by using this equals ignore case method, we don't care about the case of name1 and name2, so whether the letters are capitalized or not, completely irrelevant now. So basically we could assume that it's either in all lowercase or all uppercase. You can kind of picture it either way you like. And so if we check it, it's basically only concerned with whether or not they're the same letters. Capitalization completely ignored. So we try that, and we'll see that the names are still equal. Whereas if we didn't include this, and we were concerned with the case, because of the fact that A, R, and K are lowercase in one but capitalized in the other, these would not be equal to each other, and then we wouldn't get that statement printing to the console. So we'll keep the ignore case. Go ahead and save that. So in addition to equals and equals ignore case, we also have the compareTo and, as you might expect, the compareTo ignore case methods. So the compareTo method is going to calculate a value that represents the difference between 2 objects. And so the way that it goes about calculating that difference is it's going to be looking at the Unicode values of the first 2 characters that are different. So it's basically going to compare each pair of characters, so the first character in each of the 2 strings, then the second character in each of the 2 strings, the third character, then 2 strings, and so on and so forth. And it's going to keep doing this until it encounters a pair of characters that are different, and it's going to get the difference based on their Unicode values. And then, of course, we can use compareTo ignore case if we're not concerned with the case of the letters in this comparison. Let's go ahead and minimize this. So if we come over here, let's say that we start off with 2 fairly simple strings. So let's say we do just string. Let's do letter 1, this is going to be equal to a capital A, and then string letter 2, this is going to be equal to a capital B. And then what we can go ahead and do is right here, for this one, because we're going to be doing this comparison and it's going to give us the difference between these two strings, this is not going to give us a true or false value, so I can't use the compareTo method just by itself as part of a Boolean expression. I would need to do maybe some kind of comparison with it. So instead, what I'm going to go ahead and do right here is just print out the result when I use this compareTo method. So we're going to do system.out.println, and right here we're going to go ahead and do letter 1 dot compareTo letter 2. Go ahead and save that. And when we run this, what we're going to do is essentially compare A to B. So we're going to get the difference between those. And since B comes after A in the alphabet, it's going to have a higher Unicode value. So we've seen this before. A is 65 and B is 66. So when we do this, it's basically the same as saying 65 minus 66. So if we run this, we're going to see -1 right here. And then, of course, if we flip this, say we do letter 2 compared to letter 1, we just invert the order of this. So now we're going to do 66 minus 65. And so now, instead of -1, we're going to get a +1 right there. And then finally, if these two things are the same, try something like this. They're both A. The order is not going to matter any, because now, since they're the same, it's going to give you 0. And then, of course, if we wanted to, we could compare this. We could use this for comparisons of strings with more than one letter in them. So say like Mark and Mark. So let's say we go ahead and do name 1 and name 2. So if we go ahead and do this, keep in mind that the capitalization is still going to be relevant here, because we're using compareTo and not compareTo ignore case. So if I go ahead and check this, the value that I'm going to get is going to be 32. And the reason that the value is going to be 32 is because if you look at the Unicode values for lowercase and uppercase letters, all of the uppercase letters are always going to be 32 values, so 32 characters away from their lowercase counterpart. So in this case, this capital A right here, when it's compared against this lowercase a, that's where the difference is. So that's why that's where it's going to get the calculation from. So in this case, it's going to be doing the lowercase a from name 1. It's going to use its Unicode value minus the uppercase a in name 2. So that difference there is where that 32 comes from. And then, of course, if we do compareTo ignore case, so in this case, it's going to treat all of the characters as if they were either all uppercase or all lowercase. It doesn't really matter too much which way they do it. In either case, that would mean that they have the same Unicode value. So then the result is going to be 0. So pretty useful thing with this compareTo method. Just looking at these couple of examples that we went through, if you use compareTo or compareTo ignore case and you get a value of 0, that's another way of telling you that the two strings are equivalent to each other. So when you're thinking about them alphabetically, they would be the same value. Alternatively, if you are getting either a positive or a negative value, that's going to tell you something about the order of those two letters, or those two words, the strings that you have. So we can look at that again with the two letters that we have here, just briefly addressing this. So we'll go ahead and change this to an A and a B. We'll go ahead and change this back to letter 1 and letter 2. Go ahead and save that. And so if we go ahead and do this, we'll use compareTo ignore case. And so we get this value of -1. So what that's going to tell us is that letter 2 must come after letter 1 in the alphabet, because of the fact that we got a negative value here. That tells us that the Unicode value of letter 2 is greater than the Unicode value of letter 1. And then alternatively, we go ahead and do letter 2 and letter 1. So we get a value of 1, so now this is going to tell us that letter 2 over here, that this is going to come after the letter 1 over here. So there's two different ways we can do this. Essentially, if you're getting a negative value, that's telling you that the second value, the thing that you're passing in, that comes after whatever you're calling compareTo on. It comes after that in the alphabet. Whereas if you get a positive value, that's telling you that whatever you called compareTo on, that comes after the thing that you're passing in the alphabet. Alright, so at this point, this is going to wrap up our comparisons with string objects, taking a look through these 4 different methods. In the next video, we're going to take another look at variable scope and kind of expand on some of the ideas with variable scope. Now that we've also seen some of these new blocks of code with our if, else if, and else statements. So we'll take a look at that in the next video.